model to a licensing model, and that's what we talked about. All the battery companies down 76%. They're all doing battery manufacturing. So we decided we will try to have a frictionless business model, not to disrupt the existing supply chain, but just to help them lower the battery cost.
Richard?
So it was horrible, raising money. So first of all, I'm an engineer, I'm not a sales guy, and so I got 94 no's before I got a yes from venture guys. That's a lot of wearing ties and suits and pitching the same old PowerPoint that you've pitched 100 times before. It was horrible. And ultimately what I did is I went to the Bank of Lowenthal, that is my wife, and I said, listen, I believe in this idea. And so we used our savings, and I plunged $6 million of my own money in to get started. Now since then, the venture guys are all over it, and BMW's invested, and Toyota's invested, all these guys figured it out. But I just couldn't sell the idea. I'm not a great salesperson. I'm not a natural-born sales guy, and you have to be. And by the way, you have to tell them lies. Actually, what you said about, you have to tell them, I'm going to do this with $20 million, and then it ends up taking you 100. But they want to hear the lies. There's an inflation in the stories that they hear. They hear the lies from everybody, and you have to put the inflation factor in. And they'll later tell you, we knew you were lying, but they want that. They want to believe that for $20 million, they're going to own 100% of your company and make $1 zillion. So anyway, that goes on. You have to be able to tell them their story. Their story is primarily about exit. Whoever said that is true. They want to know how they're going to exit, when they're going to exit. Your company is going to be bought at this time. They basically ask two questions, venture guys. One, is the problem important to solve? That is, will people pay money because you've solved this problem? And the second one is it difficult? And because it has to be difficult enough so the next guy doesn't do it, right? I'm also a networking guy, right? I've got several of my colleagues here from Stratacom. So we were all networking guys. So we took on a piece that we knew that couldn't be done by the existing players or the guys in Detroit, which was the networking, right? We did a payment system, we did real-time status of the charging station, we did apps so you can find an available charging station. We did all this stuff that, the guys, frankly, that were in there making gas pumps have no clue, right? They're machining the next brass pump, and we were doing information technology. So we did have a unique contribution to make to this world. It was still nearly impossible to sell until once it's going. Now we have 80% market share. We're in 14 countries. We've got 10,000 stations shipped and 1,100 customers. Now they love us, right? Now it's easy. But when you really need the money, it's impossible. It's really a struggle. So Bank of Lowenthal, I recommend to you.
And it's probably pretty easy to get venture funding now.
Now it's simple. Now, actually, BMW came up with a surprise $3 million just last week, right? So that's the way it is when you don't really need it so badly.
And the reason is because of the venture people is, so I'll give you a question. So what happens when you cross a lemming with a sheep? What do you get?
I don't want to say it because I need money again.
Well, you get a venture capitalist. So once a bunch of people are in the deal, then everybody else wants to be in the deal, right? So I wonder.
Maybe I can add here.
Okay, go ahead.
Because I guess one of the goals is ultimately to be a public company. So maybe this is controversial here, but the greater fool theory stops once your stock's marked second to second every day, mark to market. And you have people on the other side of the trade. So if you take Tesla, for example, 50% of the float is short out there, which people think that they're lying. And they're going to basically take every word you say and try to twist it into a lie. So I think one of the disservices that the VC community has made to the public markets has been this, over-promising, under-delivering on some of the exits that we've had so far, which makes it a disservice to everyone in the room that's trying to start a business. So I'd say that throughout the panel here, we heard a couple things: capital efficiency, we heard speed to market adoption, and we heard meeting milestones. I don't think capital intensity is necessarily a roadblock for starting a business. I mean, if you look at biotech companies out there have long lead times, can be very capital intensive. I think providing investors milestones that they can track in the public markets and meeting those milestones, whatever they may be, and staying true to what you're doing and not over-delivering, I think goes a long way there, because in the end, just being a public company and having that ticker on the NASDAQ or New York Stock Exchange doesn't do much good for liquidity around VCs on how most IPOs work. You know, they have to live with that investment there. So I think that, you know, going forward, I think anything that we can do to, you know, under promise and over deliver is helpful for companies going forward.
Okay, so we started a little late, so we'll go a little bit longer than we usually do, but I'd like to go over one more topic and then we'll open up the panel to questions from the floor. So let's talk about the DOE. So the DOE has funded a lot of companies, funded Solyndra, which turned out badly, but the DOE is part of this, you know, it's another alternate source of funding, could be good, could be bad. It's been good and it's been bad. So maybe I'd like to get, you know, the panel's view on the DOE and public-private partnerships.
I think it's great for the people that have received DOE loan guarantees so far, and I think that's going to stop there. So hopefully we have a few successes from those companies and they can help build an ecosystem around what they're producing.
So we got $15 million from the Department of Energy, and we've gotten other grants from state agencies and cities. And it's been good for us. We don't frankly like it. We think it contorts the business, and our business is based on capitalism. So we want to create a financial incentive for people to buy charging infrastructure. So we don't really like these grants, but if they're out there, you've got to get them. Otherwise, you're competing with free. So our biggest competitor is a guy who's got a big grant, right, and he's giving away everything for free. It's tough competing with free because we have to make money, and we have to get margins and whatnot. So if there's grants out there, you've got to get them, unfortunately. They do help in certain circumstances. We have a bit of a chicken and egg problem. For instance, in the apartments and condominiums, where if you live in one of those, you can't buy an electric vehicle because there's nowhere to plug it in. And even if there's a 110 volt outlet, the other tenants all get pissed off because you're charging your $107,000 Tesla on their nickel. So there's problems in apartments and condominiums. They could use a little funding to get started because the landlord or the homeowners association doesn't really give a darn, right? And all of the targeted kind of marketing and all that is to drivers of the cars. So there's some segments where if you want to open them up, you probably need a little starter fluid. But in general, they're not so good. Ours worked out well. We got $15 million from the federal government. We added some money to that. We ended up leveraging that up to $37 million, and ultimately raising a whole bunch of money from private industry. So our grant worked out very well. By the way, Fox News will never report that. They will report on Solyndra till you're sick of hearing the word, and you feel bad as you drive up Highway 680 or wherever that is, 880. But you'll never hear about success stories. Usually these things work out fine. Tesla worked out fine. You'll never hear about their loan either. You'll hear about Fiskars who's struggling with their loan. It's just better news.
Same thing in our case. We are a recipient of ARPA award, $5 million, and the USABC award, $3.77 million. And it absolutely helped our case. Especially, I would say, these dollars arrived in 2009, 2010, when it was very hard to raise capital. So in a sense, they were our Series B. These were like non-dilutive, and you will realize that you cannot achieve everything on equity dollars. We are not a software company. You can't just have, bunch of servers and few computers and 20 smart people, and you need to spend money. And you're also competing with Japan, Korea, China. So you need to spend money there as well because you need to have that IP lead. So I absolutely like the ARPA program and other DOE program which helps innovation. But there are also there are many awards like during the stimulus days. About $2 billion were spent in various parts of the country building lithium-ion battery plant. At least 5 or 6 large companies, they received some 250 million, some 300 million. We are not sure if those plants will succeed. Maybe 1 or 2 out of 5 will succeed. Hopefully, as a taxpayer, I'll get my money's worth. but those are the risky investments. But innovation investments can never be risky. I think it does good to the country.
So I guess I would divide up government grants and awards into kind of three categories. There's the technology development ones, like Suji was talking about with NVIA, similar to what we got at Motive, which allows for new technology development. Not dilutive capital, basically. It's second only to customer revenue, I think, from the perspective of a startup. Definitely well above VC funding as a way to realize your dream. And I think that basically it's just, okay, who's going to choose which technologies succeed? Why not let the project managers at DOE or ARPA-E decide probably just as good as the VCs on Sand Hill Road in making that decision. I think you have to try a bunch of things. And so technology development is kind of one type of grant. The second would be product subsidies. I'm much more wary of these. I think that's probably what Richard was speaking to more. We see these a lot in medium and heavy electric vehicles because the fleets, they come to CARB or someone and they say, these electric vehicles, we like them. Our biggest problem, the only problem, is that they're too expensive up front. The upfront cost is too much. And so the agencies respond and they say, okay, well, let's do subsidies. But I think if your vehicle is too expensive up front, you need to dissect that a little bit. Like, what is the problem behind the problem? Because, yes, they're more expensive up front, but if they're going to pay for themselves over their lifetime, then the problem isn't really that they're expensive up front, because that's just shifting capital, and these guys all have access to capital. It comes down to technical risk and the fact that they have to pay money now and they don't get paid back until later. So that's a little different. So is there room for subsidies maybe to help you cross the chasm? And then the third type of grant would be manufacturing, building battery plants, Solyndra, and I think the jury's out on that. They're definitely usually much larger bets than the other two. So.
Well, I'm perhaps a little more cynical than the other panel members. I think as a taxpayer, I would say that the government in general makes a pretty lousy VC. I'd rather they left it to the VCs. We did apply for DOE loans and didn't succeed, and got a little bit of visibility into the process. And I think the DOE stuff in particular is intensely political, heavily lobbied. To have a chance of succeeding, you have to have the right connections and apply the right grease in the right places, and that's not something that we're good at. Our experience with the California Energy Commission has been much better, and I think there's a couple of differences. They're much less political. It's a much cleaner and more open process, and I'm actually quite impressed with the staff at the CEC in that they actually have done a bit of homework, and there's some smart people there, and they actually understand the problem pretty well. And so they look at what we're doing and say, yeah, that actually solves the problem. We like that. So that's good, I think. That's about the extent of my experience.
Well, I think we've heard a lot of really great stories, a lot of great advice for entrepreneurs, a lot of experience. So now I'd like to open it up for questions from the floor.
I'd like to talk about Okay, I'd like to talk about the battery technology. So, knowing what I know, we have seen an evolution. There was NiCad, which of course is a past. Then came along nickel metal hydride, and then came along lithium-ion battery, and especially the nickel metal hydride and lithium-ion. They have different characteristics. You use today in hybrid technology lithium nickel metal hydride because it has the ability to take the trickle charge. And then your lithium-ion, which expects to go through the charges and discharges. That's the reason you select this for the EV versus hybrid. But I'm not seeing any innovation in terms of material and technologies in the battery, which have much higher density. You're trying to work on the same two materials to get the higher density. Is that my impression correct, or there are innovations for different kind of materials which will give you better density, better charging time? And those are the two. You want energy density, and you want to reduce the charging time. That's what you're really looking for in order for electric vehicle to be successful. So where is this entire technology in terms of material going? I'd like to hear from the panel.
We'll let Subsidies to do that one.
Yes. So I mean, that's core to NVIDIA. That's what we are changing. First of all, like nickel metal hydride has maxed out, so you cannot extract any more juice out of it. So the highest energy density you can get is about 80 to 90 watt-hour per kilogram. Then lithium-ion batteries that you see in Chevy Volt or Nissan Leaf, somewhere around 130 watt-hour per kilogram to 150 watt-hour per kilogram. So we came up with a chemistry that can double the energy density. So first we looked at the cathode or the positive electrode. It's a very unique crystal structure that can store twice the lithium. So basically it's all in the chemistry. So you have active materials plus and minus. You have to fundamentally change the chemistry. So lithium-ion has not been maxed out. We believe somewhere around 400 to 450 watt-hour per kilogram is the limit. And that was our ARPA-E award to demonstrate the maximum limit of lithium-ion battery, which we believed was 400 watt-hour per kilogram, and we demonstrated. Then coming to negative electrode, right now, every battery you see in your laptop, in your cell phone, the negative electrode is graphite. And when you change graphite to silicon, you have 10 times more lithium storage capacity. The problem is that silicon does not cycle, maybe 10 times, 15 times, and you need 1,000 cycles. So that's where you need the innovation, that you always had the capacity in silicon, but you didn't have the durability. So that's where not just NVIDIA, but the other companies like Amprius and who are trying to solve this cycle life problem of silicon. So put them together, you can cut down the battery cost by half because you can double the energy density of the current batteries.
Ian, did you have a point of view?
Yeah, a couple. So we're not a battery company. We buy from battery companies, but of course we have to get smart about batteries. Just do a little bit of calibration here. Toyota or Honda can build a 4-cylinder engine in high volume for $300. Battery in an electric car costs the manufacturer $15,000. Okay, you're not going to get there from here. People make the mistake of thinking, well, it's electrical, it must be Moore's law. Well, it's not. There's in a Tesla, there's 1,000 pounds of very expensive raw materials, and it's not ever going to get down to the cost of building a 4-cylinder gasoline engine. So, if you start thinking about how do we get, the most cost-effective way of doing this, what gives us the shortest payback, and at current and even projected battery prices and current and predicted for the US fuel prices, you find that you get a shorter payback if you use the smallest battery that you can get away with and add a range extender engine. So that drives you in the direction of a high power battery. So the battery chemists can make a high energy density battery, 400 watt hours per kilogram, or they can make a high power battery. And the interesting thing from our point of view is it's the high power batteries that have, so far, the longest life. Where we can offer a 5-year warranty on these batteries, where they get hammered, they get 2 full cycles a day and they get hammered. We're putting 400 horsepower back, 300 kilowatts back into the battery pack under regen braking. We can make a 400 kilogram battery pack and pull 1,000 horsepower out of it for a supercar. We have a customer doing that. The power density is the thing that we're interested in, and that's where we're seeing the huge advances in the last few years. And it's interesting that the high power batteries are the ones that have the long cycle life as well, and are the most abuse tolerant. So you've really got to, there's a lot of different batteries, a lot of different chemistry. The chemists cannot optimize for everything at once. I mean, that's the definition of optimization. So you've got to figure out for your application which battery chemistry and which optimization gives you the best result.
Any other questions?
Let me add one quick data point. I'll be really quick. 2 years ago, we went out to look for batteries for that vehicle. Now we're looking for more batteries. And being battery agnostic, we talked to a lot of suppliers. The costs are half what they were 2 years ago. And this isn't projections from DOE. This is what people will sell them to us for today. And whether that's because they have extra capacity and they're buying our business, I don't know. But at the end of the day, it's very compelling, even more than I would have projected 2 years ago.
I think we can. We'd like to go. I think we want to go on to some other topics because we don't have very much time for questions. So I think if you have some other questions for the panel on the battery side, we can do it afterwards.
I think my question is for Ben. You mentioned 2 to 2.5% penetration by 2020 for electric vehicles. Looking at Prius, it started in late 90s, and by 2010, 2011, the penetration was less than 2%. What makes you think that the electric vehicles will have penetration more than that in less than 10 years?
Sure. One, I was trying to paint a rosier picture than might actually exist. No, but I mean, I think what we've seen is initial uptake is faster than the hybrid electric vehicles. So I think the hybrid electric vehicles was somewhat of a stepping stone into electric vehicle adoption. And that will help with overall adoption again, is that 2.5% there.
Yeah, it started off at about 4 times the level of the Prius. So far it's on a way faster track than the Prius was. So that helps a lot. Gasoline is also more expensive, which is a factor. And I think especially the plug-in hybrid architectures are working really well for people. One of the sort of crosses over to the battery question a little bit. We worked with Toyota on the definition of the plug-in Prius, and which caused there was a big shock when it came out because it only goes 14 miles all electric. But there's a reason, and we worked with Toyota on the reason, which is that the average commute in the United States is 28 miles, and we put our biggest market is workplace charging. So you're expected to charge the car twice a day, that you get a battery that's half the size, and a car that you can afford. So we're working on these different architectures now to make a more affordable car.
But Toyota costs, the Prius plug-in costs almost the same as Chevy Volt with a much smaller battery.
Yeah, so they're counting on a few things. One is the HOV lane is expected to be worth $4,000 per vehicle. That is, you'll pay $4,000 to go in the HOV lane, which happens to be true. They found that from the old Prius. And then you get $2,500 back from the state of California. You get $7,500 back from the federal government, and then you're back in the range again. So the automakers, by the way, consume all of those rebates in their pricing. The consumer really never gets that money. It's just to normalize pricing for the automakers.
Any other questions? Well, there's a microphone.
Thank you. This question could be for Ian or Richard, since they deal with cars and new companies. We could expect most manufacturers, automobile manufacturers, to introduce their EVs at some point of time, if they're not already. But what do you think, first, if we need other smaller players, as in startups or local, new technology companies to come up with new vehicles, whether there's a need and whether they can?
So just one piece of experience. So I'm kind of friends with a guy named Bob Lutz. Bob Lutz is the guy who did the Volt. He basically drove the Volt through General Motors. He said he would have never done the vehicle if it wasn't for Tesla. That they were not going to stand to be embarrassed by a little California startup. And so yes, in that we're the kernel of a lot of big things that happen otherwise in the industry. I think it's quite important. The other thing is we were completely ignored by all the automakers when we were a little startup. When I went and visited Bob the first time, it was in January 2008, I brought the whole company, it was 4 people, and I was on the 43rd floor, I think, of their humongous building in Detroit, and it was the 4 of us and their company, and we were saying, you really need to invest in us and take us seriously, and of course they don't until you have 80% market share, and they need you or they can't penetrate apartment buildings. So you have to gain their respect, you have to execute, you have to bring something that they can't bring. All of those are the things that we try to do that ultimately you do get respect. Tesla got a lot of respect from General Motors ultimately, and so did Toyota, right? I mean, they're making half of Toyota's cars now. They're making the new RAV4 is coming from Tesla. Tesla saved Toyota's bacon by taking over the NUMMI plant and hiring all those people back. So ultimately, the Silicon Valley company can get plenty of respect from these big companies.
I think you have to look at, what can we bring to the party that's unique, and what weaknesses do the big guys have. So, Toyota has spent 50 years and tens of billions of dollars figuring out how to build cars cheaply and reliably, and they're incredibly good at it. And if you want to compete with them as a startup company, then you're not going to do it for $1 billion. If you look at a success story like Tesla and say, well, where is the innovation? Where is the thing that they've done differently? It's all in the powertrain. It's not in the building of the cars. And yet if you look at where's all the capital gone, where's all the cost, and where's all the difficulty, it's not figuring out how to build cars. So I think from a Silicon Valley, and one more anecdote. A few years ago, Mercedes came out with this little announcement where they said, in next year's models, we're going to take 600 software functions out of the car because it's now by far the leading cause of unreliability in Mercedes cars. And if you've owned one, you know that, right? Send out a technician with a laptop to reboot the rear door so that the window will work. But they don't do software and electronics architecture and implementation very well at all, and they don't do most of it themselves anyway. The tier 1 suppliers do it. So there's a huge thing there where Silicon Valley, the way we do software and electronics and systems architecture is much better. And if you look at the revolution that's coming with electric drive, the complexity in the IP is moving from pistons and gears and valve trains. That's where they have built all their IP. That's where the complexity is in current cars. It's moving to electronics and software. Mechanically, electric vehicles are very simple. It's all electronics and software, and we're good at that. And we can do the system architecture very well. But I'd counsel us to not go and try and figure out how to build cars and compete with Toyota.
Next question.
Richard, you said something about adapting to the world we live in, and that just really stuck out to me. That's why I wanted to ask this. Also, because we're trying to make money. To maximize adoption of EVs means you need to maximize convenience, and a great way to maximize convenience, I feel, is in the charging stations. So, I mean, whoever can answer this, whatever, but what's the mood like for hands-free technology, and how do you think that should be marketed? What's the best angle to take in marketing that right now, in such an early stage?
So are you talking about hands-free charging, that is wireless charging, or using mobile devices?
Like park and walk. You park the car, you walk away, you charge it the next morning, it's good.
So that's the way our whole industry works. The people who are not used to our business say, how can I live with a car that takes 4 hours to fuel? But for anybody that owns one, it takes more like 5 seconds, right? Because my car, normally I plug it in when I'm sleeping. And I normally sleep more than 4 hours, not always, but normally.
Right.
So indeed, it takes no time to fuel my car. And when I'm driving a Chevy Volt primarily now. When I work, I plug it in when I get to work in the morning. The company pays for my electrons. It takes no time at all. So it's really quite simple. And on the other hand, I haven't been to the gas station since April. So, and I drive a lot. My car gets 218 miles per gallon, my Volt. So it's really quite, to me, more convenient. It's the paradigm shift people have difficulty with saying, okay, I'm used to fueling my car in 90 seconds, and you're telling me it's going to take 4 hours, and you say, no, it really takes 4 seconds, and they say, bullshit. That's the reality, but it really doesn't take any time to fuel your car.
More specifically, though, like inductive charging.
So inductive charging, so Coulomb has a number of philosophies. One of the philosophies that we've adopted is none of these new technologies matter until a major automaker adopts it. So the minute that there is a Chevy product or a Nissan product that has inductive interface, we will have inductive interfaces. But we will not push that rock uphill because you cannot tell those guys. They are a very proud bunch, the automakers. They are very concerned about things like warranty. Like warranty is like 50% of what they worry about. And so trying to tell them that they should do inductive charging is a fool's errand for sure. So we watch them and we visit them all the time. We visit the automakers practically every day to see where they're going, and that's where we know. And frankly, they're quite slow. So that's convenient because when they say where they're going, they're not going to be there for 3 years. So you've got plenty of time to catch up. And so when they say that we're going to adopt a new standard, okay, well, they're talking about adopting a standard for wireless. It'll take 3 years for them to adopt a standard and 3 years to roll it out in a vehicle. We got plenty of time. If they go there, we'll be there before them, no matter what they do. So we will watch them, and as they put some wood behind that ball, we'll be there.
Yeah, so it's interesting that Richard drives a Volt and not a Leaf. So, you know, we've...
I don't like to worry.
So probably not... How many of you people in the audience actually drive an electric car? Okay. So most of you not. And, you know, we've had generations, us, our parents' generation, generations back, many generations back, where we've gotten used to the idea that you can walk out there to the parking lot, whatever you drove here tonight, just walk out there, turn the key and drive to New York. And you can make that decision sitting here and you don't even have to think about how much fuel is in the tank. You just start driving. Oh, low fuel lights on. Okay, well, I'll stop at the next gas station. You cannot do that with a Nissan Leaf. You won't be able to do that with that kind of car in the foreseeable future. That's why I like the Volt architecture. That's why we have a range extender engine in our truck. So, yes, sir.
It's a hot button for me.
Yeah, go.
Richard, I testified in 98, 99, and I had a Honda.
Hold on a second. Take the microphone.
I had a Honda EV at the time, and my testimony said this. He said, we're in Sacramento, I live in Silicon Valley. I drove the electric car to the airport. I took my airplane and I flew to Sacramento, and I took a bus from the airport to testify. The presumption, and I drive a Leaf, the presumption that the automobile is the only solution for getting from point A to point B is a presumption of 100 years.
Yes.
And it's that presumption by itself which is probably actually wrong. And that the next change that we'll have will be a presumption that says that you transit the appropriate way. I'll walk to the... Somebody explained to me one day, I actually work as a sustainability commissioner as well in Sunnyvale. And so some of the things you said, Richard, apartments, 52% of the people live in apartments and in condos. And electricity getting to their cars is a major problem that we have in changing the standards that we have. Somebody said, every trip begins as a pedestrian, every trip ends as a pedestrian. It's very interesting because we don't think of transit that way. And the presumption of the electric vehicle by itself as being the electric car by itself is a bad presumption. When I met Jim, I recognized both you and Jim are working in the same space, that's a very clever space to be in because it's a recognition that the only vehicle is not the automobile.
Yeah.
And once we get past that, and that will be recognized eventually, that the automobile was the 20th century solution to transportation, as the train was probably part of the 19th century solution and the horse before that. So I think we're going to come up with a different solution, which is going to be a mixture solution. And somebody's going to be bright enough to figure out how to put all the interfaces together. That's the next big solution. So, sorry, it was a hot button for me.
Okay. So maybe we'll have the last question. Are there any more questions?
How about if I just ask you about a company now that you mentioned, Better Place?
Sure. Jason Wolf was in my office this morning. So Better Place is an interesting company. They're in the electric mobility space. Their model is a little different in that they own the battery and you buy the car, and so you lease a charged battery from them essentially by paying a subscription fee. Their core ideas are that the car is too expensive with the battery in it, so they'll take the battery off your hands to make the car affordable, and that you'll buy charged batteries for them. The challenge they've had in the United States is that we refuse to drive Renaults, and they've only got Renault to do a swappable battery. There's no standard intermixable battery. There's no D-cell yet for cars, and we don't like Renaults, and Renault doesn't like us either, so they don't bring them here. So it hasn't worked well in the US. One of the nice things is that they have a battery swapping model where you can actually take the battery out and put in a charged battery. So within a few minutes, you can get a fully charged battery. This is to solve the long range problem. So the long range problem has a number of solutions, and we've touched on it a little bit, and Ian brought it up. but one of them is having two cars. That's probably the most common. You have your Leaf, and then you have your minivan for going skiing in or whatever. So that's one problem, and frankly, it's the one that a lot of the car companies talk about. Is okay, we'll lease you when you need a four-wheel drive vehicle, we'll lease one for you. The other one is like the Volt. So the Volt turns into a normal hybrid after the first 40 miles or 35 miles or whatever, and that works good because my daily commute is well within it. And yet I can still drive it to Sacramento when I need to go and plead my case. So the Volt is quite convenient. It's extremely efficient on a daily basis. I drive it everywhere, and I still have 90% electric miles because most of my driving is a commute. Another solution is this battery swapping, where you could take the battery out every few miles. I think sort of a mediocre solution is fast charging the battery, which takes you about a half an hour to get an 80% charge. But you know, if you're going a long way and it's a Volt, you're down to LA, you're still taking a couple of days, and you got to stop and eat at Denny's like 4 or 5 times. So it's not a great solution. But we're struggling with basically the energy density problem of the batteries, and we all have our solutions. I'm with Ian. I think a great solution now is the plug-in hybrid.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank the panel for taking the time, and also for Ian and Jim for bringing the show and tell. That was very, very useful for all of us. So I'd like everybody to thank the panel, and thank you very much.
We're happy to give some demo rides too, if any of you want to come for a ride in the electric shuttle.
So demo rides right after this panel.
Thank you again, and we'll be here for 5-10 minutes until Dan starts switching on and off, then you have to get the heck out of here. So again, thank you very much. Thank you, Armando, Richard, Ben, Ian.